We have spent years trying to remove unnecessary friction from work. Wouldn't it be inconvenient to discover too late that some of the friction was where people learned how to think, or in other words, where people developed critical thinking and judgment? I'm the boardroom coach, and I look for leadership thinking hidden in the headlines. And in this episode, I'm highlighting how the emerging research around AI and cognition raises a question that goes considerably further than whether people are becoming too reliant on technology. Most organizations are understandably interested in output. Can the work be done faster? Can a manager handle more? Can a junior person produce analysis that previously required somebody more experienced? Often, the answer is a resounding yes. The less visible question is whether better output still tells us what we think it tells us about capability. Think about that. Does it still tell us what we think it tells us about capability? Historically, a strong piece of work told you something about the person who produced it. They probably worked through the evidence, decided what mattered, encountered contradictions, and worked out which argument survived. AI weakens that connection. Someone can now produce sophisticated analysis without experiencing all of the cognitive difficulty that once sat behind that level of output. Now that can be tremendously useful, but it also makes leadership assessment harder. We may start promoting people whose visible output has matured faster than their own judgment. We may also start trusting senior recommendations because the work looks more complete than the thinking underneath it actually is. Research is beginning to give us clues about this. Microsoft found that greater confidence in AI was associated with less reported critical thinking among knowledge workers. Anthropic found weaker immediate learning amongst developers who used AI while acquiring a new skill. It also found different learning patterns depending on how actively participants engaged with the system. The interesting part is what the human continued to do. Did they challenge the answer? Did they investigate? Did they encounter and resolve an error? Did they understand enough to recognize when the generated conclusion stopped making sense? Now this matters because senior judgment is rarely exercised on the easy version of a problem. It's the nuances, the detail, and the edge cases that draw out good judgment. The executive keep when the information is incomplete. The incentives are conflicting. Several people can defend their position, and somebody still has to decide. AI might become exceptionally good at organizing those competing arguments, but it cannot absorb the accountability attached to the conclusion. Also a succession consequence here. Future leaders may spend much more of their careers working alongside systems that can immediately supply an answer, a structure, and a recommendation. And that changes the experience through which expertise is accumulated and how judgment as an executive capability is either developed or lost. This is why organizations may eventually need to become much more deliberate about how they recognize genuine judgment, because the quality of someone's visible output will tell them less than it once did. Polished recommendation might demonstrate that somebody works effectively with AI. It does not necessarily demonstrate that they can recognize when the recommendation is wrong, incomplete, or commercially naive. And that distinction becomes more important as responsibility increases. At senior level, difficult decisions rarely fail because nobody could produce an answer. They fail because assumptions were not challenged early enough. contradictory evidence was rationalized away. Ownership became blurred or confidence hardened before the reasoning justified that. AI can improve the material surrounding those decisions, and it can also make the material look finished before the thinking is finished. And that may become one of the quieter leadership risks of widespread AI adoption. Boardroom Coach follows these shifts because technology changes leadership behavior long before most organizations change their assumptions about capability. Follow or subscribe if that perspective is useful, and return for more judgment on the hidden beneath the business headlines. Here's a thought to leave you with. If AI increasingly supplies the first judgment, where are your future leaders going to get enough practice forming one of their own? Which leads to today's question. If AI disappeared tomorrow from one important decision process in your organization, would the people responsible for that decision still possess enough independent understanding to reconstruct the reasoning, challenge its assumptions, and defend the conclusion? If that produces hesitation or disagreement, responsibility and understanding may have begun drifting apart. At that point, the first senior move is unlikely to involve reducing AI adoption. It's to identify the moments of judgment that are commercially too important to remove from the human part of the process.